All right. Good evening. Today is Monday, April 14th, 2025 at 5 p.m. We are in the Brecksville-Robbie Heights Education Center, 6638 Mill Road, Brecksville, Ohio. This is a special meeting of the Board of Education in public for the purpose of discussing the campus master plan and providing a permanent improvement update. This is not to be considered a public community meeting. There will be no public participation at this meeting. This meeting will be live streamed via YouTube and will also be recorded for later viewing. Please consider subscribing to our YouTube channel where all recordings are posted. Item 1B, please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 1C, roll call.
Mrs. Galick?
Yes.
Mrs. Kramer?
Yes.
Mrs. Kwiatkowski?
Yes.
Ms. O'Mara?
Yes.
Mr. Dosen?
Yes. We're going to move on to item 2, which is our work session agenda, permanent improvement in campus master plan. So I'll turn it over to Jeff and Greg.
Awesome. Well, thank you first for making yourselves available for tonight. We wanted to just take a work session to go over permanent improvement updates, which we have many of our friends with us tonight. And then we'll, after talking about the permanent improvement, and kind of sets the stage for then talking about the campus master plan, which we have all kinds of great information to share. It's meant to be open and have great dialogue and ask questions and kind of talk about what next steps may or may not be. So, but thank you. And thank you for the different setup of the room. We thought it's a work session, so it'd be a little bit more informal and maybe lead to some good conversation tonight. So with that, we're going to kick off with the permanent improvement kind of overview. So Craig and the rest of the team can tear away at this.
Sure. So I don't know if, Brian, if you guys want to have a mic back there, you could grab the last one and share that if there's anything else you guys want to add. Quick agenda on this is that we're going to review the financial overview again, review our priority list and any updates that we've had since we met in November, ongoing needs, what's coming up next, as well as then moving into the campus master plan. So here is the current outlook that we have. So we have an unencumbered projected fund balance for our PI-003 account of 1.1 million, unencumbered building fund balance of 2.3. If you recall, most of that is basically assigned for the road. And $383,000 exists currently in the 070 account. So it's a total of $3.8 million. It's unencumbered at the moment. We will be getting about $99,000 in for our homestead and rollback, which will come in hopefully next month. $1.9 million approximate for next fiscal year in those property taxes. And then that gives us our unencumbered projected fund balance for 5.8. When we subtract out what is projected for the driveway access, as well as what we've already planned in our prior 25-26 PI project list, priority list, that's $2.7 million. Then we are down to about $876,000 that would be projected to carry forward for other planning purposes as we move into 26 and 27. So just to review, this is the list that we had from November. If you see that there's a couple with asterisks, we had a couple things go on where we decided to use some of our PI funds to help protect some of our general fund dollars for like the softball field repair, hexagonal skylight updates, which is about $5,000 at the elementary school, and the maintenance vehicles. We were planning for one maintenance vehicle and we ended up for $90,000, and we have updated that to do 2 vehicles, and it would be about $103,000.
A little background with the baseball or softball field repair. We had a drain that was underneath the field that collapsed and was failing. So the field was holding water, and it had to be repaired for that field to drain and be playable this spring. And that drain that Brian has shared was 17 feet below the surface. So the repair we had to do was kind of circumvent that drain and kind of go around it. So when you drive by the softball field, you'll see there's some straw and new seating put down where they did a majority of the work. So that was a successful repair and has led to field being playable this spring.
So, and we can talk about any of those as we go forward too. So the high school chiller project is nearing completion. We should be up in what, a week or so, 2 weeks? Everything works. So again, we added the softball field repair to this list. Also the vinyl pit covers would also be, is one that was added to this as well. I don't know if you want to explain about that as
The
well.
long jump pits. So we had new sand put into our long jump pits last year. And these pits are just used to keep a lot of the debris and moisture and things out of it so that sand doesn't become cement in the long run. So those are on there and protecting now.
The bleacher repair for the high school gymnasium was a part of this. That is essentially complete. We have computers and monitors. Those are almost complete. I think I just sent the last orders today. Our buses we've ordered, those will be delivered in July. Middle school roof replacement, we already talked about that. So you can see the budget on the left and the cost on the right. So those would be like bid day savings. And then transportation fuel system was $15,000. That was right on the money. Asphalt at the transportation and maintenance center. This is the bus lot. That sort of not bidding process, but quoting process just came in. And that was under budget as well at $208,000. We just got those numbers, I think today, right? Friday. So that was good news for us. And then, as you know, the campus driveway is on here for $2.4 million is the estimate. We will know eventually once this is fully designed and out to bid. Hopefully we'll have some bid day savings there as well.
Craig, what's the different, the color coding on this?
So
I can guess.
So the yellow ones are kind of like, we're kind of like, they're either complete, nearing completion, or fully like waiting for it to just be done. The red is basically just the campus master plan is out of a different fund. And then the white ones are things that we're working on or are coming in the future. Some of them are slated for 26 on purpose. So we just haven't done any work with those yet. So most of the stuff that we talked about in November, I guess the overall arching idea here is that most of the stuff in yellow is already done and allocated and whatnot.
What is the funding source for the campus driveway?
That will be the building fund from the elementary school. Of what's left. So we would then be looking at turf replacement sometime after next year's playing season. And then we're currently looking at stuff for high school boiler, middle school abatement. We continue to do that. And then right now the slab on grade is just kind of on hold still.
What is middle school abatement again?
So every year, Brian has been working with some of the buildings that have the 9x9 tile. And so they're abating all of that asbestos and replacing it with carpet tiles, I think, right?
Yeah.
And doing like little refreshes of a couple classrooms at a time as we go.
Because as they clean and wax each year, they'll pop. And once they start to pop or curl, then they have to be abated.
Yeah.
Because of the asbestos.
Do we anticipate at all? I see the budget for all of these items. Do we anticipate that some of these quotes may come in even higher with what's going on with tariffs?
The economy.
Yeah, you know, I don't know if you guys are hearing anything about, I mean.
I think it depends on the project. We were just talking earlier today. I don't know if some of these will be affected because a lot of the stuff is manufactured here, or
Okay.
like when we're talking about, a lot of our maintenance vehicles are Fords or Chevys or things like that. So a lot of those may not be subject to those items. Turf replacement, those are usually made here, but we don't know if the source materials are from another
Yes.
country. So those are things we're going to continue to monitor. But as we all know, day by day, it could be changing. Any other questions on this before we move on?
Well, what about the campus master driveway? You know, are we getting any feedback on would tariffs affect any of the?
We have not
potential
yet.
bidding?
I don't think
Yeah,
that
most of the product and things that we use for that project are not sourced outside the country for the most part.
and a lot of it is the earth moving and the asphalt and stuff which we create here. So we don't anticipate that yet. They've not told us, AVG has not told us that they would expect that at this time. And I guess the good news is the asphalt came in less just now on the other project that we have. So these are our ongoing needs. Continue to purchase 2 new buses a year. Aging maintenance vehicles, we're going to continue to work on those. And then just what'll be for your approval on Wednesday is that we have a whole list of items that we are getting rid of. which includes 6 buses, 2 trucks, 3 vans, 1 trailer, and food service equipment that we no longer have in use. So part of this, as we've looked at our resources, we've evaluated the entire fleet, whether it's buses, vans, and trucks, and we're looking at only keeping what we need. And so we have a couple older vehicles that we aren't really using anyways, and so it's just best to kind of get rid of some of those now, because we don't need them, and then we'll focus on replacing the ones that we use on a regular basis.
What's FS equipment?
Food service,
Oh, food service.
cafeteria. Curriculum, right now, they have planned for about $350,000 to $375,000 for next fiscal year. And then we will continue to monitor and work with them. I actually meet with them tomorrow to talk about their PI budget for 26 and 27. So we'll start that process now. And then again, technology replacements are as they age out, which right now our technology is in a good spot in terms of devices. All of the buildings have had full refreshes in terms of their laptops or computers, the Promethean panels, all that stuff is up to date. So the elementary will be slated in 2 years to get new computers down there. So we're working on a technology plan with EduTech. And then last, if you divert your attention to the bottom of that, is that we did get a grant secured from, that's BWC, right? No.
Those were the AG's office.
AG office, yes. The AG office, we had grant funds that Mr. Koss submitted an application for us. This was money that we originally in November had slated to pay for these updated cameras. We have 2 different camera systems right now. We have the old system, which is a lot of our exterior cameras, and then the buildings all have the new cameras. So now with this, the plan is to get everything onto one system, and we will get rid of the other system that we're not using and that really doesn't have high quality video or any of those things anyways, and move to this. We slated that out of PI, but there is more than enough to cover from the grants to pay for all of the upgrades to those cameras. And I think we're adding probably how many total?
Probably 8 extra cameras in there, plus Centegix, plus Coco.
Yes, this is one of the grants is also parts of what pays for Coco and Centegix. So it's enough to cover all of that. So we're doing a 1-for-1 replacement of exterior cameras and then adding 8 additional ones in places that we need them. This building is one of them, especially because this drive would be then over this way. So we'll have video on the backside of this building if needed. So it would be additional cameras on campus.
You said Centegix and Coco?
Coco the dog.
The dog.
Oh,
Hot cocoa for meetings.
Coco the dog. Hot cocoa.
wait, so what is it? A grant? Oh, a grant.
The grant
How
will
does
pay for all
Coco
Coco
associated with
training
cameras?
bills,
Yeah.
Okay.
which they've done in the past as well. This just
Yeah.
continues, but to be no cost to the district.
For how long?
We don't, that's the one thing we don't know for
Right.
sure. The AG's office has given this particular grant, which is a per ADM. It's usually, I think, was it 350 or 550 per kid?
It was for.
It could be in between.
It went up
So they
this
give-
year, it was down last year.
So it's like 16 or 17,000 that you can use for safety and security and all of these different items or whatever. So this was the grant that originally had paid for the acquisition of Coco. And then on a yearly basis, it pays for vet bills, food, treats, those types of things.
Did it pay for training? Did we?
Mhm. Yeah, that was the original for the first 2 years. It was divided to pay for the cost of it. So then these are some projects that we'll start working on or looking at. This is kind of like from the last of what would be next, but as we know, this kind of list is fluid. So we've identified the backbone to the HVAC system, as well as still looking at whether or not we would do some carpeting and stuff at the high school, additional asphalt abatement, roofing, because there is still another section of roofing that needs done at the middle school, PA upgrades and stuff like that. So this is a little bit subject to change, but these are some things that we're at least eyeing for right now. That again was kind of mentioned in November, but kind of carrying forward of what we'll start to plan for as we look at next year.
I thought we were up to date on all of our HVAC needs.
There's a couple still at the middle school that were older. Is that what those are for?
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
But
That
this-
were-
That's a.
See, there's a high school.
Oh, the high school part?
Yeah.
You can talk to that if you want.
So the high school has not really been updated. That's why we're doing the chiller. The boilers are the next thing. The backbone is a communication for each VAB in each classroom.
And then the next step is the zones of the VAs. So those are at the 25-year life expectancy. A big project, but over maybe the next 5-6 years, we can tackle a little bit every year to bring it back up to what it should be in last year.
And what about the middle school?
Middle
So
school,
that's where we did a huge,
yeah, middle school, there's still a couple old boilers, a couple miscellaneous rooftop units, a smaller one. I know the teacher's lounge, is one that isn't working, so it's the big stuff, the boilers in 3 of the boiler rooms are done. And then a lot of the rooftops are done in the bigger areas, but there's still some areas that need upgrading.
Yeah, some of the areas that did have air conditioning before, were not touched when we did the larger parts of it with the ESSER dollars. And there's the follow-up and deferred list. This has not changed. Again, we're still following up on some of the high school HVAC stuff, the windows replacements.
Clarification, the slab on grade is the high school, is that the issue that we have in the one wing, right? Flooring?
Yeah. So currently that's
We
still
can,
on hold.
yeah, we continue to defer that.
Correct.
Last time we only got one company that bid on the project.
One company that was at the maximum allowable bid price, which was, I think it was like 9.8% above our advertised estimate, which is you can't go above 10% or over the advertised estimate.
Okay.
so why is the slab on grade not on the deferred?
So the slab on grade was originally slated, and we were having conversations recently about whether we actually take it off and move it back to deferred, because it was on deferred. We then moved it on to the priority list, and then when this all kind of happened, so it's kind of in limbo. To answer your question, I don't know if it's going to go just back to deferred. I think we'll probably decide that by the next
And it's
update that we
gonna
have.
affect a few others, like when we talk about carpet install or carpet replacement, we're not gonna replace the carpet until we do the slab on grade in that area of the building. And it's not just that area of the building, they'd track quite a bit of traffic going in and out to do that project, correct?
Corridor would be included in there. So and then once you get your first floor or the main floor portion done, that has new carpet, but then the opposite side of the hall doesn't. So where do you really draw the line on the project? Once you start that slab on grade, that ball is rolling and you're investing more and more money to keep everything up to the same speed. If not, you're gonna go from one floor to the next floor or one classroom across the hall to another classroom that has 25-year-old carpet versus brand new.
So where do we stand then with the slab on grade as far as with architects and rebidding?
We can go to bid whenever we feel like it's feasible.
And did they have feedback for us as to why we only have one
They
company?
did not.
I just know that that's been pressing in the past, and I'm just curious as to how long we can allow it to be deferred.
Yeah, and one of the other reasons it wasn't formally moved to the deferred list is that it is still part of that non-encumbered project total.
Okay.
There are funds allocated for slab on grade right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
So if
keep
we-
in mind,
if we
all of
figure that
the
out.
feedback we got was there's no safety issues with it.
Right.
It's just some.
Trip hazard at
Right,
most.
it's not-
Mostly a trip.
And unsightly.
Can't you drop your pencil?
It just rolls away, maybe into the other room underneath the wall.
So any questions on where we are with PI stuff before we move on to the main event of campus master planning?
So just on this PI, so we're, on the earlier slide, the carryover for future planning in FY 27 and beyond was, a shade under 900,000.
Yeah.
So we're not putting a hit list together of what we think we're gonna do in FY 27. Or
We'll start using whatever we're building next to start planning for 27 here shortly. Yeah. That'll use that plus what we're bringing in for 27. Yeah.
I just really appreciate the update and getting to see it all.
Yeah. Well, and one of the other things that I was talking about earlier that I want to make sure that we're encompassing that Rachel and I will be working on, and maybe some other people as well, but this is kind of like this list of this yellow of like, this is what we've done. is how can we like start encompassing what we've done each year to then also maybe include in some of my financial updates on the community newsletter
Okay.
to talk about how important the PI stuff, the PI
That's
money
really
is to the projects that we're doing, which does ultimately allow us to have a longer levy cycle, right? Because you're not using general fund. And there's a lot of school districts that don't have a permanent improvement fund. But as you can see, we've got big projects that we still have to do when you have so much building space and equipment and vehicles and everything else.
What's the status of the sign in front of the middle school? That's
We're
not-
just holding on it. That sign, it doesn't work. It hasn't worked
Right.
for years.
There's no plan to fix it.
No, but that's gonna be part of the campus master planning. And, when we redo traffic flows and things like that, we would pick a style and replace the signs. But
Okay.
we weren't gonna replace them prior to determining what entrance is gonna be what and things like that.
Okay,
So-
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Let me ask if the state plunges over the cliff of insanity and puts in place this law that says you can only carry over, 30%. Would the thinking be that we're gonna take our surplus over 30% and redirect it towards some of this PI spending?
So it's things that
Is that too early or to talk about? Because I mean, if they pull the trigger on this, depending on how quickly they implement it.
So it looks like the implementation would not be until fiscal 20 or January 27. There would have to be this plan. So I'm assuming that they would take fund balance at the end of 25.
Yeah.
So we'll definitely do some assessment based on what happens because we have most likely a deficit spend this year, which then gets more complicated for next year, depending on how things kind of shake out. Especially in the world of, we've got some windfalls a little bit in terms of we had a larger group that's retiring, so that'll get updated on the May forecast. However, we also got some really high expenditures coming out of special education, which are things outside of our control. And some of that is in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So we've got to look at that to see where we are, but it still would project another year of deficit spending of where we fall at the end of fiscal 26, which it seems like that would be the end point of what they would use to then potentially adjust. What we have been advised to do is, and we'll continue to work on this because it's just coming out of what we talked about last week while I was in OASBO, is that they are encouraging school districts to have an approved kind of like a campus master plan, a facilities master planning in place, which is also a great place because we now have the 070 fund that's been opened. We have the PI fund. They're a little bit different. They have a little bit different functions, but yes, there's ways that can be around there that can be utilized potentially.
So the likely impact, if this becomes law, they give you some runway to plan for its implementation. And we might be at a place where we're not over 30% threshold. But I would imagine then the huge impact for school districts is that when you go back out for a levy, you can't ask for very much because if you drive up your balance over 30%, then so you're going to be on a very short levy cycle because you can only ask for dribs and drabs.
Correct. Greg and I talked today that it possibly could change our timeline for our next ballot issue. Very likely.
Yeah. So stay tuned. What we don't know is we don't know what will come out of the Senate. So that can dramatically affect, because if this percentage is not a part of it, it's less likely for this to happen. There's also that it gets in there, but there's been some people that have talked about one of the things I'm gonna model now that this also was brought back from last week is modeling what the cash flow looks like, because there are inherent ebbs and flows to our cash flow, especially being a locally funded district where we get money based on property taxes. And we don't have state funding that can supplement in between, because we don't get any money from the state necessarily because of our retirement systems and how they deduct from the foundation. So we could potentially be in a very difficult situation to cover payrolls and things like that, depending on where we would be. So it's going to become a real tight balancing act if something like that happens. And you're below 30%. So, I mean, right now it would be us off about $12 million from where we are today.
And refresh my memory, are districts now only allowed to put levies on in May and November?
Correct.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's no more August special.
Okay.
But yeah, a lot of strategies to be coming. Any other questions on PI? Campus master plan.
All right. Well, I will openly say it feels weird to be talking about the campus master plan and talking about some of the figures that we'll talk about towards the end when there's so much up in the air with just school funding in general. But just to kind of reground us, remember the whole purpose of the campus master plan was birthed out of the idea that the city was asking for us to figure out what we were going to do with our campus, so that traffic on Mill Road could be alleviated some. I think my first week in the job, I met with the city. They presented me with the traffic study that they had done on Mill Road that had indicated that a roundabout and a 450-foot turn lane. And at that time said, let me get my feet wet. We're going to start a campus master planning process, and let's make sure whatever changes that we may make to our campus that isn't a waste of your dollars on doing something on Mill Road. So that's what started this whole process. We brought a group together from the community to help give us some feedback. And then our partners at AVG has helped us come up with what we have today. So the first document that I'll give you, it kind of helps keep things in perspective for you, because you'll hear me refer to phases. Phase 1 was the demolition of Hilton, which is already done. And they're actually filling in and starting to grade, and we'll be planting grass and everything else. So, partnering up with AVG, setting up the phase 1, the demolition of Hilton is already done. So you will not see a phase 1 on that map. It starts with phase 2, which phase 2 is the driveway, the Hilton driveway, as we're referring to it. And that's what we've been spending a great deal amount of time on. But in talking about phase 2, we've already gone through and we have phase 3, 4, 5, 6, and even a 7. 7 is just the junior high building. And we haven't had a ton of conversation about just the junior high building, except when we brought the committee of individuals from the community together, there was not an appetite to build a new junior high, which the only place for a new junior high would have been right here where we're sitting. And for a couple of reasons, I think. We were just coming off of a new build of an elementary. And then 2, which wasn't said loudly in the room, but that would move one building from Broadview Heights into Brecksville. So I don't think anybody really wanted to entertain that conversation. Many people believe as though our junior high is a great building with great bones. It needs a refresh. Doesn't need a tear down rebuild, more of a refresh. So that's phase 7, which is the furthest phase away. So in between there, let's start with phase 2. And Craig has it up on the screen. I have it over here as well. This is the latest rendering of phase 2. We went to the planning commission meeting last month, provided them with kind of idea of what we were thinking and where it was going, answered quite a few questions. The representatives from the city asked us to consider a few things. They asked us to consider the width of the road in the turns coming in off of Mill. So this turn here, as well as this turn, were widened. Also, they asked us to consider the size of the roundabout. This is referred to as, or was referred to at the beginning, like a mini urban roundabout. It has been enlarged slightly. That roundabout also has a rolled curb, which is referred to, it can be mounted, meaning buses and or the pumper truck of the fire department or anything else could come up onto the curb and get through. However, this roundabout is large enough for a bus or a fire truck to get around it without doing that. But safety vehicles could get over if they need to. It would have an area in the center for some type of art installation or mascot or whatever we may choose to put in there. Also, a big topic of conversations at the planning commission meeting was the lights. So the lights are going to be along. Originally there were 14 lights going from the entrance all the way up to the roundabout. And that originally they were going to be 28 foot high. Well, the city asked us to consider that, as well as our friends in the Chippewa Hills HOA down here weren't super thrilled about a light pole being 28 feet high. They asked us if we could eliminate poles and or reduce the height of them. So we chose to reduce the height, but when you reduce the height, you can't reduce the number of poles. If not, you'll need more. So actually in this drawing, and it's tough for you from your seats to see it, but you'll see black little dots. And there are actually 2 additional lights, and they're around the roundabout to keep the roundabout well lit. But there are those lights. Those light poles now would be 18?
Yeah, 18.
18 feet. They are LED heads on those lights. Why is that important? With the LED lights, they're high efficiency. They are the light doesn't spill out all over. It's very directional. They could have a photo cell on it as well as a dimmer. And at certain hours they would dim. And when it picks up movement of a car or pedestrian, then they would light up lighter or brighter. So a lot of features that old technology and old lights just did not have. We have been, and on each one of the heads, there's a shield that would be on this side, on the homeowners association side, to help shield some of the light. Because it's not so much that the light will be spilling into their yards, but they'll see the lights. So there will be a shield on the back side. We continue to meet with representatives from the HOA. Brian and I just Friday morning met with them to show them the new rendering, talk about the lights. We've gone as far as giving them an address in North Royalton to go see the lights and see how bright they are or how bright they're not. We also talked a lot about the water runoff. The situation with the water runoff is greatly improved by just taking the building down. Not as much hard surface. However, we will, and in the design phase, designing an underground chamber that will be in this area that will collect all the storm water, and then it will be, coming out of like an 1.5 tube. So it slows it down, and the HOA has been extremely happy with the plan so far for the stormwater runoff. Those aren't decisions we just get to make. Those are EPA standards we have to follow. But the HOA is very, very active and very, very interested in that. One of the individuals was just in here 20 minutes before you guys got here, looking at the drawings. He's over in the woods walking to see where the pipes are and everything else. But we continue to be a good neighbor and continue to talk about that with them. So Thursday, I will be back at the Planning Commission meeting to go over this, looking for preliminary approval. By all means, or by all indication, that primary approval will come because we've continued to work with the city in between meetings and supplying them with the information. Once we have that, then they will focus in even further and start the design work. And then we will go back in the month of May, the Planning Commission meeting for final approval. And then after that, then we can start talking about bidding and going out for bid. So hopefully out to bid this summer, hopefully start work in August per se. And our goal, and if everything rolled as we want it, this driveway could be finished by the time it snows. Because they stop cooking or baking asphalt sometimes, usually mid-November, depending if you have a really cold fall, it could be early November or late October. So we're hoping that possibly by the time it snows that this road would be in. So that's phase 2 is the driveway. We have it budgeted. We're prepared to move forward with it. By all indications, we are on that track to move. So any questions with phase 2 or anything you'd like to know more about with phase 2?
So we went from 14 lights to 16?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then I see on the rendering that there, I'm assuming bushes, trees.
Yes.
So do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because I do think that that actually also cuts down on car lights,
Yep.
things like that.
This is coming both from the Planning Commission meeting, but also from our talks with the HOA. So the 2 residents here, we've had conversations with at a coffee chat. And then multiple of these residents right here have been involved in the whole process. So we did put a screen of evergreens here so that cars exiting, the headlights would hit that instead of going straight through into that house, as well as cars entering here. Talk about mounting this up, and it would be a gathering of different varieties of evergreen, arborvitae, different things of that nature. Benke, who's the landscape architect for us, really liked putting trees in. We like trees too, but we don't like too many trees. So if you have Frank Koff over there, he'd like to see about 1 of every 2 here disappear. And of the trees on our property. Here though, this would be mounted with those type of screenings that we have in the drawings, and we can show you what ones they are. But those are some of the enhancements that we tried to do to be a good neighbor, and also so it's visually appealing. We're doing a project like this, and the same conversation I had with the HOA and the Planning Commission is, we don't want to do something that isn't visually appealing, just to, just to get by. I mean, the whole purpose, or another purpose, is this creates an identity for our campus. This is the main thoroughway onto our campus for many. And it just sets the tone for the rest of the campus master plan if and when it comes to fruition.
What about pedestrian or bike trail?
So on here, you will see there is a sidewalk. So this road will be curved, we'll have a sidewalk. So there's a sidewalk on this road right here. It's actually a sidewalk we're joking saying it's going to nowhere, right?
Okay.
It comes over here and it stops here with phase 2. Okay, and this is the crosswalk right here. If you were coming in on the sidewalk, across here. And then in further pieces, we continue up with new road and new sidewalk all the way up. We're talking about when this goes in, this road right here, we barricade it and block it off. So you wouldn't use this road anymore from here to the middle school parking lot. Because people coming from the Broadview Heights way on Mill, we don't want to make them go all the way down Mill and come in here to come all the way back to high school. So high school student traffic coming from the Broadview Heights kind of way on off of Mill will enter the board office as normal. And they come down here and hit the roundabout.
Okay.
Coming from Brecksville, if you're coming this way, you're gonna come in here. Whitewood, you have a choice, turn right or left. You guys can just pick how you feel that day. If we left this road open, people would avoid the roundabout coming in here and they'd go this way, which would clog traffic up here. So we would find a visually appealing way, cement planters, big red balls that are out front of Target, who knows, something to block that road off so people can't get by.
Permanently or?
Well, in the,
It'd be semi-permanent, could be permanent because future, if we go all the way here, we look at the whole totality of the campus master plan, that road disappears completely. So we shift these fields up on top of them, and it's a pedestrian walkway here, trail. So that's why when we're doing this, we built this in a way where it can be done in phases, and you can do multiple phases together, if you so choose, or not. So, but yeah, that road eventually in the whole campus master plan goes away.
What about signage? What's the signage that would happen?
So part of it, there'll be new signage at the entrance down here. And then there will be signage right here as well. So when people come to roundabout, they know which way, either to the board office or to the high school and middle school would be this way. So Benke and some of their other drawings had new signage around roundabout.
Is that part of the RFP that's going out, the signs?
We haven't prepared that yet, but I'm sure that'll be in the process soon.
That's captured in the cost estimate.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Signage is in all.
Landscaping as well.
Yes.
Mhm. Yeah, all of it. So
And do we?
I tried to hold off before giving you this, just because I don't want it to distract you. But these are ballpark figures and estimates of what's included in some of the costs. So you can see as we start talking about some of
he's
this.
going right there, isn't he?
Uh-huh.
Do we have a plan when this goes live on how we're gonna reroute traffic?
Yep. And we literally just got last night at about 6:30 and
A
70.
Sunday?
77 pages of traffic study on our campus and how it currently is, how it would be then with all the campus master plan improvements. So we have that to dig through that I will
That's
be
with
sharing
all
with
of
you guys. With all of it, but it also talks about pieces of it as it's phased in. Mhm.
Is there a chance, because you mentioned doing the driveway in the fall and that they have to stop at a certain point with the, the asphalt? What if we do have a really cold fall? Like what would happen?
I would just wait till the spring.
You pick it back up in the spring.
Okay, so
The price is already locked in.
it would just, wherever was completed, they would stop,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
Similar to how you saw with Hilton. They got to a certain point and decided, let's not pull up the slab. Let's get through the winter so we don't pull it up and miss the muddy mess. Then they pulled it up within a week and now they're topsoiling when the weather's permitting, hopefully seeding soon and you should see green.
So as we know, that part, phase 2, we have budgeted and ready to go 2.4 million. When it goes out to bid, hopefully we have some bid day savings, but that's kind of the ballpark that we're looking there for phase 2. And again, that was a priority of the district, was to put that drive in and we were planned and ready for it. All right. So before we get too deep into those numbers, 'cause we'll talk a lot about those numbers at the end. Let's talk about what phase 3 is then. People have asked me a lot, well, once you do phase 2, what's the next priority for the district? Well, the next priority for the district is to add a bus-only entrance on the far west side of the middle school, which then all of our bus traffic coming up Mill Road would enter here, come around back of the middle school, and we would be able to drop a lot of kids off curbside, but then there'd be other buses parked in the middle here as well. Phase 3 is a much larger phase than it may appear on here to you, because there is substantial amount of all asphalt, concrete, curb, sidewalks, rerouting of traffic. So that would be the bus entrance here, coming around back. There's a lot of work that would be done here. The middle school entrance at the light would turn into the parent pickup and drop off, and they would come in, go around this island, and then back out. You would not be able to travel this way. Okay, that's where I'm telling that road is now closed off. This parking lot would be redone as well. Right. Brian, other things that I missed, you just go ahead and you jump in. Anything I don't say, okay?
That would be the area where the middle school and high school, if you have a kid in both schools, you would drop off middle school over there.
Yeah, let's talk realistic. So you're bringing your kids to school. We did phase 1, we did phase 2, phase 3 is done. You would enter either the board office or off of the Hilton entrance with your high school, middle school kid in the car with you. You come up, you traverse the roundabout, go up here, you turn right into the big parking lot where the buses currently sit. Okay, come up here to the curb, drop your middle school student off, continue forward, merge back in up here to the high school. It's how that traffic pattern would work.
If you've got both.
If you have both. Right. If you don't have a middle schooler, then you're just coming right here. You're not going up into this slot.
Those little blobs up at the very top, now it says fence in the drawings that we have at our table. What?
That would be landscaping and new signage at the road.
Okay, so it's not actually fencing.
Well, it could be because the landscape architect had brought examples from both Broadview Heights and Brecksville as to architectural examples that would make us feel like Broadview Heights or Brecksville. Like Brecksville has a lot of brick.
Yeah.
And Broadview Heights has a lot of white picket fence. Look at their entry into the city. So that's what some of that is. But those are details that we haven't different. Those are details that we haven't dug into. They're just, architectural renderings at this point.
So what you'll also notice is the existing art room that's on the board up there is in red.
So right here, we have 2 art rooms and a boiler room.
So in this file that you have broken out in front of you, have that art room and the boiler room being relocated to another area in the existing middle school that is going to get remodeled in. So there's a mini remodel or repurposing area in this budget as well.
Yeah.
Which is why this phase is so much more expensive than the campus access drive phase.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we still have some questions about the total, the total there because, they indicated on here, they're gonna take out both classrooms and the boiler room. And Brian and others questions if the boiler room really needs to come out. That's gonna save considerable amount of money. You move the boiler room. You have a lot into that. So we still have a little bit of work to do there to determine really what those numbers are. So that's why I want you to have these numbers, but I don't want you to think these numbers are concrete, because they're not. They're architectural estimates. And, we will see changes, design changes, hopefully for the positive in our way, meaning the number comes down. But this is worst case scenario, I guess is what I'd say.
And there's additional parking in front of the middle school where I think there's 4 spots by the flagpole that are kind of there. If you don't know they're there, you drive by them real quick.
Right here.
This really gives an entranceway into that middle school, really defines where that main entrance is.
Are you
specifically for visitors?
Are you adding additional spots in front of them?
Included in this budget.
These would all be, that's where they are
That's
now, but there's only
Yeah, it goes,
4.
and I think there's only, so it's like
Yeah, 15,
a lot
more
more
than
visitor parking.
And the idea is in the design, both on phase 2, the Hilton driveway, is kind of a boulevard look, sidewalk, curb, landscaping, same thing here. When you come in at the middle school entrance here, because this would be a middle school entrance, this wouldn't be a high school entrance, it'd be a middle school entrance, a boulevard kind of look. This would also be obviously an entrance that would be used for extracurricular, Friday night football, things of that nature. They would come in from both ways, actually all three, but both ways.
And then it picks up the sidewalk from phase two to be able to get up to the middle school and the high school as well. That's where the sidewalk to nowhere gets picked up in the space.
Yeah. Because it'll stop there after the Hilton Drive. It gets picked up here.
So when, oh, go ahead, Lisa.
What part, so I can see bus parking will be where the diagonal lines are.
Mhm.
And then the top lot, that's middle school staff parking.
Here,
No, sorry, at the
Up
top.
above.
Yeah,
Oh, here?
that's middle school staff parking. And then will those two at the bottom there become like student part and visitor parking?
yeah, they're currently used for, well, this one's currently used for student parking, this one and this one, which would probably not be, because that would be buses need to go. So this would be used for students, this would continue to be used, or would be used for students, because we don't use it for students now.
Yeah, we can use either. On this drawing, it does have that as staff down here, and that is just actually 66 parking spaces up there.
Well.
But
that's
right now
there
it's-
and there.
Right, correct. We have flexibility, I guess, regardless. We can put it either way.
Yes, there's more lots down there.
That where the.
Yeah.
Yep, and then you have this lot up top here still.
Yeah.
And then the ones down here.
Are we increasing parking spaces overall? Like what's the current parking spaces and what would it go to?
Yes, that was an early number.
Real early number.
We are increasing, it's not a drastic amount. This is a guess, don't hold me to it, but it goes from like. Say it, so it is an increase, but it's not
increase.
substantial.
Yeah.
So just for clarification, what Ms. Gaelick said, that top lot that we just paved a couple years ago there in the middle school, that becomes for buses.
Yep.
That will convert to a bus lot.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure I was understanding. I am having a hard time right now visualizing.
And there's some work that has to be done
Around
between that
it, yeah.
lot and the one below it. They have to do a little bit of work, but yes, because underneath that lot currently is a storm water chamber. Underneath that lot that collects the storm water, so.
And if you remember back to some of the other drawings that we had for that, this is the least expensive way to do this bus loop.
Yeah.
There was another option, but it was gonna ultimately be way more expensive. And I would have to rip out what we put in.
Yeah.
So this kind of at least helps us utilize what we put in.
And the difference between those two options, not only being more expensive, but the reason it was more expensive was we were able to get all buses curbside, which is ideally what you want. Then you don't have kids going in between buses, everything else. You drop them at the curb, they get on from the curb. This has a combination of both curbside and park diagonally.
So when do you anticipate being able to pay for phase 3?
Oh,
you're getting there, Ellen.
We're getting there.
Way ahead of us.
See, that's why I didn't want to give you those numbers yet. I mean,
Let's go on to phase 4.
Let me ask on phase 3, even though it's considered an entire phase, I mean, clearly that art wing and or the boiler room, if it needs to be relocated, that could be done as a phase 3A,
correct.
right?
Correct.
You had funding for it,
Mhm.
because that's a self-contained piece of work that gets it out of the way.
Yep.
Which could set the stage for the remainder of phase.
Which is the
Oh.
whole reason for the campus master plan. The whole reason for the campus master plan is if and when we're able to do projects that we can afford at the time and have funding for it, we know what we want to do and then what order we need to do it. And we're not just doing a shotgun approach. And many school districts, I'm not even saying Bristol Robbie Heights, but many school districts, because of the way we're funded, sometimes it's a shotgun type of thing. And then you go, why does that road go that way? Or why didn't they do it this way? That was the whole reason for this. So as much as I would love to just take one foul swoop and do every single thing in this, it allows us to do it in phases and be responsible to the community. So I'll go on to phase 4. So phase 4 is on top of the Hilton building. This would be the turf softball and baseball stadium is what it's been referred to. Notice here, you'll see our drive. Our Hilton Drive is in. One thing that is not in phase 2 is this parking lot right here. We're not predetermining it. We're not putting that parking lot in when we put the drive in. So in phase 4 is the addition of this parking lot, a softball field and a baseball field. With this, we would have another building here for restrooms and concessions. Another parking lot, which that parking lot is kind of there, Brian. I mean, there's some blacktop in that area right now that we're leaving for reasons we'll talk about. But that would be a parking lot, so the sled riders would come down the hill and into the park during the winter time, okay? So, but there's no baseball games going on then. So both baseball, softball, in the rendering, in the talk would be turf. We'd have stands, bleachers, press box, or, press box on both.
300 seats at each field for visitors is what's on the pricing.
Here, you'll start to see the pedestrian path coming in. Think of Metro Parks, Limestone Trail, maybe something of that nature. Because many of our kids now walk down the road and then walk along the hill and out on the mill down here. So eventually, when the camp center is completely done, it's more than a path to nowhere. It continues on all the way up to the road. To get kids off of Mill Road, and they're not walking.
Let me pause for a second and circle back to phase two.
Sure.
After we put that rotary in. One is, what's the impact on the cross-country course? And then the second is, where do people park to go sledding?
Well, couple of reasons. Let's go back cross country. If you set a record at the Bruce Lurch, it may be forever because the Bruce Lurch is going to have to reload. Coach and I talked about all of this right when we started talking about it. He recognized that, well, any changes we do to hill down here is going to change that. So depending on when any of this starts, if it starts this summer, the Bruce Lurch is probably going to relocate for next year. So we've had conversations and they're well aware. Mr. Maslana and the coaching staffs have talked about other locations where they can hold. So, where are they going to park to sled ride? As they always do here in the board office, it's the busiest place on a snow day when you come in. And in later phases, I don't know if you see it on any of these. Yeah, if you look over at phase 5, eventually there would be additional parking at the board office that would feed these practice fields, competition field, feed these baseball and softball, and nice sled riding parking too someday. There.
So that's where we're picking up some additional parking too.
Yep, that's where a lot of the additional parking is coming there. Right now, Brian, what do we have here? Why are we?
Right now, we have the old existing playground there. We're leaving it there because we don't know if those baseball fields are going in or when they're going. But it is going to be a green space, and that green space is going to get used by someone at some point.
It is right here.
And if we don't leave that in there, the road's going to have curbs on it. People are either going to jump in the curb or they'll be parking up here at the board office. So you'll see on the phase over here, we have a temporary drive going in to connect to the somewhat remaining asphalt parking. It won't be nice. It's not a fresh pave. We don't plan to put fresh stuff on it, but we need to at least have an area for community members and people to park if they wish to use that green space.
So did I just miss it? Because I looked down the hill and it looked like everything was gone. Is it just the asphalt is still, there is?
It's there.
Yeah, it's still there.
Yeah.
Right close to the base
Closer
of
to
the
the
hill.
base of the hill.
Yeah, if you come out with these windows, you'll see down there. It's all still there.
So because, it is going to be green space and soccer associations and different teams
Yeah.
want to use it. So that's what we plan to put that access way in and leave some asphalt there so there's somewhere to park.
Which you mentioned water runoff and it's getting it's not really an issue right now because Hilton's been removed.
Yeah.
How does turf work? Is
Oh.
that,
This is the things I've learned along the way.
okay.
It actually improves it
Oh, okay,
because of the way the turf is built and the aggregate underneath holds water.
okay.
So, actually, the architect said that with the HOA group with us. I said, should you say a little water to them so when we have to turf someday, it actually improves the runoff.
Okay.
But when this improvement is made, when they put in the stormwater chamber that they're gonna put in, they're designing it in a way that when we do these things, it can be tapped into and expand for additional things that will arise.
There's an option you'll see for phase 4 as well as a additional locker rooms, restrooms, coach's office, storage, a training room, and a lobby.
Very good. So if you look at your sheet of the ballpark figures, things like that, where it says phase 4, you'll see where it talks about the base and tells you what it includes. And then there's optional items that they gave us kind of an a la carte store instead of, and it's on the slide. I call some of the optional items.
And those are things we can obviously decide later too, but. there
Decide
are-
later, private funding, different avenues that we could do with some of those things.
So I'm sorry, as part of phase four, we relocate the baseball and the softball field.
Mhm.
What are we doing in the space where the old baseball and softball?
Takes us right to
phase five.
But no, but if we're doing phase four, and we're not getting to phase five. We've built the new fields. What are we doing with the old ones as part of phase four?
Well, once you do phase four and you relocate, because you leave baseball and softball where they're at while this happens. Once these go in, you can take those fields offline. Or you could continue to maintain them if the city wanted to use them for additional fields or something of that nature. But the idea would be that those would come offline. We would not want to be investing money in those facilities.
Sure, no, I understand that, but does phase four's budget number include money to take those fields offline?
No,
No.
it does not.
That would all be a part of phase 5 to take them offline.
Right, but
They're
but
just
then,
gonna be there,
but
not
are we
being-
still gotta maintain it to some degree, right?
Yeah, mow and
You
grass,
know, what,
yeah, keep
what
it
happens if it starts becoming, safety issues there because we're not maintaining it? Anyway, I don't wanna go too far.
I would
into the
say-
weeds, but-
So there are facilities that you just have to maintain them to keep them sightly. It's relatively inexpensive compared to what we maintain it to play games on. So if we would turn it into fenced in green space is what it would turn into.
Not gonna maintain it down.
So if we make it all the way to phase four and beyond phase four, then we come over here to phase five. Phase five increases the parking here in front of the board office. Not because we need additional parking for board meetings, but this additional parking would be used for these facilities. Baseball, softball, these two facilities here. Also, there's additional parking here where the softball field used to be. So right where the softball field used to be, will turn into another parking lot. This parking lot will also serve the stadium on Friday nights, as well as these two facilities here. This would be a practice grass field. Basically, in theory, is there now, but it actually would shift up and be able to get a full field in there. And then this would become a competition field. In the plans, it would be for soccer and lacrosse, be stadium with lights, seating for home and visitor, and would be artificial turf with restaurants and concession stand here. We see the addition of the pedestrian pathway going here, going all the way down the mill, and all the way up here to the middle school. You also see that the road here is completed. So there's a piece of phase five that connects these two roads. There would be a road, it would be the old road. And this is something we haven't talked to the architect group yet. But we did phase two and we did phase 3 and 4. I wouldn't want to leave that little piece undone. So at some point we'd have to talk about that, right, Brian? You and I spoke about that. It's like, we're not gonna wait all the way to phase 5 to do that little section of road. It'd be something we'd look to address sooner. So, but that's phase 5.
Phase 5 also has, a 4,000 seat home bleachers, a 500 seat, sorry, that was
1,000.
stadium.
That
1,000 home bleachers.
1,000.
500 seats.
Bigger than our football stadium.
Yeah.
So 1,000,
1,000 and 500.
500.
Press box, sound system, scoreboard, fencing, really right sizes it for our soccer and lacrosse attendees.
And the optional locker rooms, if we wanted to do that as a add-on a la carte. It's the same price, it'd be the same size as the baseball field. It's a, what is it, 1,000? 3,000 square feet? No, 3,000 square foot for an expanded facility building.
So right now, football, track, soccer, lacrosse, they all use the stadium. Am I forgetting a sport that also uses the stadium?
You have your middle school sports as well.
Right.
You have
Marching
big
band.
sports, marching band.
So by having, like, you're putting two teams in their own field, and that helps with scheduling, I
Oh, yeah.
assume. Yeah.
Absolutely does.
Well, and it does probably help because I think there are some sports that are practicing until almost 9:30, 10 o'clock at night.
Yes,
He's still using, the turf field up at Blossom.
yes. For the youth, well, the youth, I don't think
We
we
don't-
are.
we
but the
don't
youth-
use it at all
Yeah, the
anymore.
district doesn't.
And I know just the middle school, I think, right, still uses Stadium Drive. We would
Yes.
bring them obviously back here. And there's a cost to that too, just because we do transport those kids from the middle school down to Stadium Drive. So there would be some cost savings on that side of things, just to be able to have them practice right here after school.
And then we haven't got into deep details about that competition stadium, but I mean, it could be set up to do soccer, lacrosse, as well as a second football field too. So when you have like middle school football going on in high school, so you could play it's a second competition field
Yeah.
that would be multi-lined for many different events.
Mhm.
But only having the size of athletic department that we have with only one competition turf field makes scheduling a challenge.
Yeah.
I mean, just simply, I can think here's a simple example for you. Spring, you have track going on in the main stadium and you have lacrosse going on. It's only a matter of time if they don't schedule correctly that somebody's getting injured by a lacrosse ball flying through, flying around. So they have to stagger those. Some schools will put up netting on the ends, and some go as far as going all the way around. That's a relatively large expense too, just for netting. So this would separate those two sports, track and lacrosse.
Can you talk about the locker rooms? So it looks like it's optional to add locker rooms with soccer and lacrosse and then with baseball, right?
Mhm.
So like, what is our locker room situation now? Is it?
Our locker room situation in our main stadium is terrible. What I mean by terrible is it is not sufficient size for the size of athletes and number of individuals on a team. Plus, the restroom facilities in our main stadium are very poor as well, with the number of urinals and toilets and things like that. So we haven't got to phase 6 yet on the stadium, but right now, those facilities at baseball and softball now we use porta potties. They don't have locker rooms. Those teams don't use locker rooms, as well as that's kind of a luxury. You know, being a former baseball player, we didn't necessarily have a locker room, so that's a luxury. But if we talk to Mark Mazzalona, we don't have enough storage, and it'd be nice to have some dry, well lit, climate controlled storage areas for a lot of the equipment that we use for athletics, because that equipment's expensive. As we saw with a pole vault pit here this spring, you know, being destroyed by some rodents, we had to make an emergency purchase. So those things happen from time to time, unfortunately.
And this is just, again, like I'm already spinning out, construction costs and getting them established. Then, you know, every one of these phases is gonna have concessions, and all of that. So like thinking about, we've gotta fill those concession stands, we've gotta with equipment, things like that. So
That's why you see some of those pieces as optional pieces on here. Like it's like, okay, here's the base, like baseball, softball, we need dugouts, we need like the press box per se, but the concession restroom areas, those are kind of sometimes in some of the phases are options.
I guess I was just looking at.
And even if it's in the base and we're like, well, we don't necessarily need that. Again, we haven't drilled down to that detail. We wanted them to kind of get, here's kind of what we want. And it's a perfect example of that is phase 6. Phase 6, we gave them little to no direction on what we would want. And so they went all out. They went all out at the tune of, I think, what's it,
$22 million.
So I almost hesitate even putting this up here because we haven't had enough conversation with ABT to narrow this in. But major pieces to this that you could take off of it right away is the turf. We've already budgeted for new turf. So if we were to, again, one foul swoop, phase 6, we could take from that number the cost of the turf, which is, I think, 800 some thousand possibly. So, and scoreboard, because that's something that the athletic boosters have begun raising funds for and have a considerable chunk of change to help put in a new scoreboard. So those two items are going to be done with or without this whole campus master plan being done, because they need to be done in the very near future. The big portion of phase 6 is the large building / field house at the end closest to the middle school. We really didn't give them anything. They just picked a square footage of some similar projects that they have done, and that's what they put a footprint in for. They also expanded the press box and as well as some of the seating. And then at the other end of the stadium, the south end of the stadium, they increased the ticket booth and things for visitors entrance down there. But again, some of that number that's presented in that paper are things that we are already planning for and are in the works. So I wouldn't put a whole lot of stock in the numbers they're giving you for phase 6. What we're going to do is we're going to go back to them and say, okay, we're going to talk a little bit more about phase 6 and what we really need What we really need is sufficient bathrooms or restrooms and locker room facilities, which incorporate concessions and an entrance into the stadium. One thing you'll notice in that drawing of phase 6 in that northeast corner would be the entrance to the stadium, where currently we don't really have a defined entrance into our stadium. It would be on that northeast corner, which is like where the football locker room is right now, where the tennis courts are. That would be the boulevard or walkway into the stadium.
And this one also plans for visitor restrooms, I think, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that was, that's sorry.
Other additional restrooms.
Yeah.
This phase,
All of it, but it also keeps the people separated
Yeah.
sometimes, which is good.
this phase though, phase 6, unlike the other phases, there are a lot of, almost every piece of it you could do individually. You don't
Mhm.
need to
Correct.
do it as a full phase.
Correct.
You could tackle each one of these are like small bites of the apple.
Absolutely.
So pieces of phase 6 will and can be done over
Right.
time.
Like the turf and the scoreboard and,
Right.
you know, if we want to improve the ticket booth or a restroom.
Right.
But when you get into, some of those need to go
The heavier
together.
listing. Thing, sure.
But absolutely, there's pieces that you could do it. And I think there's some thought to that as well along the process, that those are some items that may bring greater chances of being privately funded.
Right.
You know, rather than privately funding a driveway or an access road, privately funding a field house, it's a key piece.
Right.
Yeah.
Might have more.
Sure.
So I think to that point, Mark, when we look at like, this kind of encapsulates this next part about some funding scenarios, is like when we look at what we say as base CMP, campus master plan, this would be phase 3, 4, and 5. Because we do kind of view phase 6 as not as researched. We need to give them more guidelines and guardrails, as well as things can be done on a more, I guess, segmented method, right?
Pause there 1 second.
Sure.
Because I just want to mention phase 7. Because
Yes.
it is on your map. Phase 7 is the junior high building. And, you know, what do we do with the junior high building someday? Is it a refresh? Are we talking flooring, lighting, and paint, moving some walls? Or is it a complete renovation? So again, we haven't spent a considerable amount of time in that, because I guess in my personal view, I think that's down the road a little bit prior to some of the other needs that we have, but it needs to be in the conversation.
That was actually one of my questions. Just because I'm following along and thinking that makes sense chronologically. I'm not sure that, and I don't know if, like, are we certain that the middle school renovation or whatever it is phase 7? Like, could it be moved up? I'm just
Well, in
curious,
our
like
order
how we
of-
decided that was phase 7.
In our order of operations here, we started with phase 2, which is something that we had budgeted for and planned for. And phase 2 and phase 3 are all about safety and access to our campus, rerouting traffic, and kind of going into what we do on a daily basis. When we get into phases 4, 5, and 6, we
Yeah.
go athletics.
I absolutely agree with the first few phases. I just kind of feel like maybe phase 6 and phase 7 should be.
I think phase 7 is just so large and we don't know what that looks like. What he's just saying is like, that could be like a $5 million refresh, or it could be like a $30 million renovation.
Okay, yeah.
And that's what we don't know yet completely, I think.
Yeah, and I think when we look at, you know, when we look at the current status of the junior high, I keep saying junior high, I apologize, middle school. I'm sorry. When you look at the current status of the middle school, we feel as though, and Brian, please speak into this, that the building is in good shape. We almost have a completely new roof. There's a couple small pieces yet to do. The HVAC has been upgraded. So we're not in a scenario where we have water coming through the ceiling and our HVAC needs to be redone. So I'll leave it at that if you want to add to that.
Yeah, so if you walk into the main entrance in some areas, they look all right. You go into some of the classrooms, like the 8th grade wing, you look in there, they're in need of a refresh. That's why I've been each year, each summer, we've been doing some classrooms with the abatement and doing the forward. We don't want to sink a bunch of money into it, but we know we just can't let it sit. So we're trying to keep it up to date as much as we can. I think the electrical's fine in there. It's not like we're out of power, especially with items going to LED or starting to save stuff. But that's another thing. If we transition that entire building into LEDs, that's another big project that comes along with new drop ceiling. That'll add, a nice visual to it. Paint, your cafeteria is in good shape. The auditorium was just redone, so
Beautiful.
ultimately, I think the bones are good. It just needs a little love to be shared with.
We're very fortunate to be in the situation we are with the middle school being in the condition that it is.
I think the reality is, phase 6 and 7 today are many years down the road. And at that point, whether they're still called phase 6 and phase 7, and priorities should, change. I mean, this is, Ellen, probably no different than our PI project list, top 10, right? I mean, that gets jumbled every year because a boiler went, or, a higher priority. And so you're constantly refreshing that list about how much capital is available, what's the highest priority, what things are going on. So, this thing breaking it out, right? I mean, you could take phase 6 and you could break that into sub-phases, if you really wanted to. But for purposes of discussion, those are the down the road.
And planning, if we have somebody come to us and say, you know what, our family foundation wants to pay to put in a field house at your stadium.
Yep.
Well, then we now know where it needs to be on the space and what size we can kind of accommodate. And even though that's at the end of phase 6 per se, maybe we're in the middle of phase 3, but we will take the money if somebody's coming to us wanting to pay for something like that. So this allows us to sit in front of people who have an interest in investing in our campus and in our students and say, here's our plan. Because I, like many, have criticized school districts for not being proactive. And this is trying to be as proactive as possible with the information we have today.
And how Jeff opened up too, with the middle school building, the community doesn't have an appetite to relocate. So we know that is the footprint of that building. When it gets remodeled, or if it does, or what scope of that remodel is, we know that is the footprint. We don't have to look back and say, why did we put that? We know why and why it's.
So back, okay. So I think what we thought makes the most natural progression, if we're gonna look at different sources of funding, would be to truly look at what might maybe be more realistic in doing 3, 4, and 5, because 6 is obviously a large amount. So you can see that the second line goes to, these are in millions, so it's $35.5 million to do phases 3, 4, and 5, which is still a lot of money, right? To add the stadium would take that up to 55 million. And then if we did the enhanced CMP, that would be taking all of the options and the stadium and all of it. You're looking at $60 million, which is a lot, right?
Yeah.
So, we look at what these are and what we have. And I gave you some examples, which apparently are not fully on the bottom of this, but
They got cut off.
they got cut off.
It's on your printed sheet too.
It is on the printed sheets that are there, just for a point of reference in terms of, because even if you take a $35 million project, and let's say that everyone says this is a great idea to do phases 3, 4, and 5, trying to fund that through PI or even private investments is not possible. It would take you 30 years, if not 40, and we wouldn't get to 6, and then we'd have to be replacing other buildings. So if it's feasible, we ran some calculations on a calculator that would calculate potential millage for bond. The $35 million options, actually I have it here, would be looking at 35.5 million, 36 million for 25 years of debt service would be 1.5 mils to fund something like that. Conversely, you could go a longer term if you were up at the $55-ish million mark to take it to 2.4 mils over 25 years, or go longer at 1.9 mils. And again, that's just for reference if that's a direction that the board, the community, and whatnot would be interested in doing, just so that people would have a reference of what that would cost to then be able to do all of these at one time.
And those numbers again are on the printed copy at the bottom of the page, and then on the back side it continues.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, at the top, sorry.
So if we got the money through like a bond issue, would these not be phases anymore? Would they be all?
They
one-
would
or
still-
be,
They would still be phased, like you'd still have to work in progression to get them online, but you would have the money to start working on all of them kind of simultaneously.
Because you wouldn't.
Like you'd be able to do phase 2 phase 3 and phase 4 kind of you could probably phase those similarly. Because phase 5, you have to wait till you move the stadium or the baseball fields and softball fields. So you could theoretically start on phase 3 and 4 at the same time. And you're dealing with a lot of different contractors. Some will be the same, but some will be different. With like baseball fields.
And then bond issues are like, they're also just on the May or November
Correct.
cycle. Okay.
Correct. What do you think?
I think it's
Super.
really phenomenal, you know, I mean, really, it would be quite a spectacular facility. So, we're getting that. And I like the incremental phasing in as choosing as we have the opportunity to begin construction or whatever it is that we have to do to it. I just, you know, I think it would be.
And the other thing too, I think we've talked about this with the road, is that these are very rough numbers. We almost kind of had to push them to give us these numbers because we believed that they would be high. And I think that the same type of thing would be true if you recall from this last bond. And I think I personally think we've accomplished a lot from the bond that passed in 2018, because not only did you get an elementary school a large elementary school, but we did large upgrades for the fire alarm system at the middle school, the entryway at the vestibule. We funded a lot of additional projects, the tennis courts, the track, different things have come out of that fund. It's funded a lot of other projects. So if we would go underneath any of this stuff, we would have it written the same way, I would assume, where we would be able to use those dollars for let's say you couldn't fund phase 6, or you could put it towards phase 6 or parts of phase 6. You would have that ability to do that. Or if something major would happen, you'd have additional funds for capital items if things would come in under bids.
Go ahead. Oh, I was just gonna say, it's very exciting and I'm just curious what the two of you think about timing.
Well, you know, through the whole process, we said this is a dream, trying to be proactive rather than reactive, right? We didn't want to be shocked by the sticker price, which we knew we would be at some point in time. I continue to say it's their estimate. It's going to be high because they're not going to give us a number that it comes in over it then. So we need to take that into account. You know, I think it really comes down to what our community wants for our campus, right? I think I hope I'm saying this right, and I don't mean to, I don't want to sound rude, but I talk to people in our community and parents who are involved that want a certain level of service. Well, to have that type of service, we have to have some type of mechanism to cover those expenses. And this is an expense. And for those who don't have children that are involved in athletics, there's pieces of this and through phases 1, 2, and 3 that aren't athletically minded. Yes, phase 4, phase 5 are athletically minded, but that's community wide. Those are used for our sports teams, but the youth programs, soccer, lacrosse, football, I mean, I can see them being all over this. And both cities were involved in this planning. So the idea is that they're shared facilities. To what degree, we can always talk about that. So I think it's exciting. I think it takes the beautiful campus that we have and gives it purpose and an identity that sets the tone that when you come to Rexville Broadview Heights, this is a representation of who we are. I think it's super exciting. I was pleasantly surprised that we could talk about phases 3, 4, and 5 with 1.5 mils. To me, that sounds doable. I think of the community I live in right now, and if they came to the ballot with a 1.5 mil bond issue to do everything here that takes care of safety, security, parking, traffic flow, baseball, softball, lacrosse, soccer, and all, I'm thinking that sounds like a good deal. But I'm also realistic. I'd love to spend all my days in this, right? Because this is all happy talk. But Craig and I talk about it all the time. We have to operate our school district. And we have to have a balance. And that's where we just don't get to pull the trigger and do this. We put it in front of our voters and our community, which involve those who are involved in our school district and those who are not. So we tried to put things in like that pedestrian path. You know, I see Mary, who's the one resident that lives on Mill Road, just north of the entrance, who came to a coffee chat. She is walking her dog on our campus almost every day. I ran into her the other day, and I think I blew her away because I knew her name. And I said, Mary, how are you today? She kind of looked at me. I said, coffee chat. I'm Jeff, remember? She's always walking something. Well, there's a pedestrian path now that she could use and members of our community could use. So I think of ways of what is the benefit to our community. The benefit to our community is if and when you would ever sell your home, this is already a desirable place. Having a campus like this just further does that. So,
And I
that's my
think,
thought.
and there's other mechanisms to, when you look at the bond, like for the smaller, the base campus master plan at 3, 4, and 5, you're looking at 1.5 mils over 25 years. There is a possibility that we could say, well, we're okay with more and we go to 20 years. You can go the opposite way and try to go to 30 years. Now there's a metric that you have to be able to prove before you could ask for it for 30 years. But of course, they all come with an interest rate. So the longer you borrow, the more money you pay in interest, right? So, but there are some other mechanisms that I just chose when I thought might make more sense. That's why we did a longer term potentially for the whole kit and caboodle. But there are other levers to that calculation too, which we can run examples very quickly if people want to know what they are. Jeff and I were talking, and it just seems like it might be reasonable to look at 25 years at 1.5.
We're looking at mills, right?
When we're looking at mills,
we
yeah.
start talking about ballot issues, people are going to talk about mills. They're going to want to know on every 100,000. So that's what we were kind of centering this conversation around mills and what could be doable or acceptable to our community.
And some of this is benefit to technically the new valuation. So this is what the newest valuation. Under the old valuation, it wouldn't be 1.5. It would be closer to 1.6, 1.7.
Do you agree with everything Jeff said?
No, I do. I think it's reasonable. I think when we talk about like what makes sense, that's why we've kind of internally have kind of also like realized that phase 6 and phase 7 are just kind of, well, phase 7 for sure is like the unknown. Phase 6, we also talked about like once we get past phase 5, phase 6, like we have a stadium, we're going to have new turf, we're going to have a scoreboard. It suits our needs now. Do we have to do these major improvements? No. But I think the field time and the additional field space that we have when we've got soccer and lacrosse and all these other sports and getting kids home in a reasonable hour to get to bed or do their homework or whatever, I think also benefits academic achievement rather than not playing under the lights at 9:30, 10 o'clock at night.
Some of those programs are expanding, some of those that they are expanding programs
Mm-hmm.
at the youth level.
Lacrosse.
All the
Yes.
others, so.
Yeah. And it does depend on we've talked about the community partnerships. It depends on what that community partnership looks like. If there's not necessarily that community drive or influence, we've talked about recently of like, should we be renting our outdoor facilities if we have space or time, like in the summertime or whatnot? Maybe there's some rental income that's available.
There's
You've got the
rental
space.
revenue possibilities with these facilities that baseball and softball being turf would be used all the time. That other competition field for soccer and lacrosse would be used all the time. We would have to have, Rachel would be a big part of this as well. We'd have a very robust rental agreements in place that we could maximize those opportunities. I mean, our baseball field, the playing surface itself right now is very nice, same with softball, but it's weather dependent. And then, it's tough. I've been asked many a times by the homeowner association in particular, are you putting lights or planning putting lights on those fields? And I always say, well, it's not my decision to make. I said, however, we are not planning to, because the reason for that is when our baseball and softball seasons happen, you don't want to be playing at night. It's too cold. So we would have no need for lights. That would be, if there was lights on those fields, that would be driven by community partners like the city. We'd have no interest in putting lights on those fields.
So if we pass a levy, like let's say we pass a levy and it goes to phase 5 or phase 6. Sorry, a
Yeah.
bond. If we pass a bond and we get all the way to phase 5 or phase 6, like what would be the timeline if we got the money if the community approved it in a bond issue? Like when would we get to phase 5 or phase 6? Yes.
So before you answer that, just because if we would do something like this, I think we would still be looking at the same time frame of like a spring of 26. You would collect that money in January, start collecting the money from the I guess from the resident side. I think we would bond that we would get it before then. So you would get the money around the second part of 26. Sorry, I don't think that through, but then time frame wise, if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, so
At
in
that
that
point.
point, it's complicated for me. We're going in, can't take the existing baseball softball offline until the new ones are in there, so we would have a gap between there, let's be a year. But then, design, that's an option that if we are going out, we are at a standstill to pay for design. We're at a certain conceptual design. Does the district pay more out of the PI fund to get a head start on the design process? So if a bond passes, then we can hit the ground running with construction documents. There's a lot of options, but I think we really need to know what the appetite is for this from the community.
Craig, when the bond money comes in, I'm assuming this was similar to the elementary building, that there was some interest and investments on the money as we had the money and it hadn't been expended yet.
Yeah, and the elementary school was delayed a year too, which technically helped us in terms of investment earnings. And there would be a part of this as well, because once you sell those bonds, I mean, you basically get a monetary dump of, let's say, $36 million, where you would be able to immediately start investing that money and helping to fund additional projects down the road or pay for additional features or whatever. We ended up making probably close to $3 million, I believe, on the elementary school over the course of the several years. But I do think that this would still take several years to fully, 3, 4, and 5 would still take a couple of years to plan just because of the winter with the elements. I think you'd have some pauses.
Like less than 5 years?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I would hope.
I think
Because
it
3 and I'm no construction expert, but 3 and 4 could be happening at the same time because they don't really overlap. And then 5 would then come once 3 and 4 are completed enough to get to the middle, because you can't move baseball and softball and take them offline until phase 5 would be done.
Your contractors can move from the baseball up to the competition. Once those are done, they move up there, they have the turf on order, they have the essentially carpet, ready to go. They can start other projects, plan for them to move right to it. You don't have to stop, rebid, redesign.
Right.
And we haven't really pressed ABG hard on that timeline feature yet. You know, what we're sharing with you is fresh for us. I think we had this conversation with ABG maybe 2 weeks ago, or was it right before spring break? I don't remember when. So, you know, we're still fresh in it as well. So there's still questions like that follow-up that we can ask them, but we didn't want to get too far ahead of our skis.
So what, in your opinion, what should the next steps?
I think what I'd like to do with the board's blessing is bring that steering committee back together. You know, they were with us at the beginning of, hey, let's dream, let's place things on, let's do what we want to do. And when we left them last time, we had that rough, like, okay, this is where pieces would go. Now we can go back to that group and say, here's where pieces would go. And here's what phases would look like. Here's what ballpark figures look like, and continue to get feedback from them as well. That would be my immediate next step, is to bring that group back together. Number one, out of respect, because we brought them together once, asked them for their input. But let's show them what their input has produced for us.
And I think too, for you guys to get feedback from the people that like,
Absolutely.
Let's see what
I think it's helpful because it seems like from that group, I mean, there was a lot of excitement once those groups were together, which is probably dissipated and now needs to be ramped up, but also for you guys to see what the appetites are of people you know that you represent, that are community members, as well as ones with kids in the district, athletes, non-athletes, all of it.
Okay, that
I
sounds.
think it all kinds of builds up, at least the conversations Craig and I have had. Let's take the whole state budget out of the picture right now. And we were talking and looking at levy cycles, thinking that possibly May of 26 was a target of being on a ballot for some type of issue. Operating, and what we're talking about. Depending on how that budget plays out, that timeline may have changed for operating, because we can't collect that much yet, right? Because of if they're going to put a limit on us. So that pushes our levy cycle further out for operational funds. Not that we're happy about that at all, because it puts us in a very difficult position. So May of 26 was like the first, like we could be on the ballot for something. And we had talked operational and bond, separate items, together items, do operational, because remember, both Craig and I will say, we got to operate the district number one. And then maybe come back in the fall with the bond. So we had just thrown those things out, planning, thinking. So depending on where the state budget lands, May of 26 could still be possible ballot issue. What that ballot issue looks like because of the state budget, I think is unknown right now. Might be more clear this summer.
Yeah, and I think because I've not gone through it here either, I think maybe, well, I guess you both did, right?
Mhm.
From the last one, is that for a May ballot initiative, we would need to, it would be in front of the board in December. So the final certifications would all need to be done by February. I think the deadline this year was February 5th, just to also put that in terms of a timeline, if that timeline would work and that's what people would agree to, or that's what we think I guess the appetite is.
So
May of 26, we'd be having conversations with board action in December.
because
What would need
it's
to happen.
due 90 days ahead of time, and then the board has to approve something.
Correct. There's 2 resolutions to have to get done. You have to do the whole like resolution to proceed, and then you have to get the certification from the county and all that stuff to meet the deadline, which is early February, to get onto the ballot. Just to kind of put the time frame of, we're sitting here at April. That time frame is what's 7 months away, 6 months away.
Right.
And maybe it's not in the spring of 26. It could be the fall of 26 too, but just of what we were thinking originally. Yeah.
But you're not talking about this fall.
No,
Okay.
nope.
Well, as exciting as all of this is, I have grave reservations on sequencing and going out for bond money before we have our operational house in order. I don't think that's a wise approach to sequencing. You've got this variable at the state, which trending wise, it doesn't look good, right? Even if they just keep everything, at this point, if we come out neutral, but there's just a trend line where they're going to shift more responsibility, operational responsibility onto homeowners and taxpayers, right? So I see a likely scenario where we're going to ask more. We're going to have to go back to the community for more to get operating, and we're very close to that point where we got to start looking at when do we go for operating. And so from my perspective, what's on my mind that with all this is as great as it looks, I want the operational element secured. And because, you go out and we go out for bond money and it passes, and then have to come right back on the heel, say, now we need operating money, and it fails, and then it fails again. And people are like, didn't we just pass something? And then all of a sudden we're cutting programs because we can't get operating money, yet we're doing all of this campus stuff. That's a bad look, right? We're redoing all this campus stuff and we got to, cut back on classes, staff, all that stuff. So my initial impression is, from a sequencing standpoint, that as great as this looks, that we need to get the operational side solidified before we can start looking at this. And then when we do look at this, when I look at this, I say, and this would be something we need to get community feedback on, but you could easily break out phase 3 and say, let's just do phase 3, because 4 and 5 is athletics. Now you can do them all together, or you could say, you know what, let's chunk it out in small. Maybe the community says, you know what, because phase 3 is all about safety and traffic remediation on Mill Road. That is going to be a bigger seller than athletics. As much as the athletics is great and the campus look great, that's a bigger ask for the community. It would be much easier to sell phase 3 to say, look, we're talking about another access road into the campus. We're talking about separating the bus traffic so it's more safety for students. You're talking about a phased approach to campus improvement. Maybe you do them all together if the community has an appetite, but maybe we go back and solicit input saying we could do it all. And in that case, it's 35 million and it's 1.5 mils over 25 years. Or we could say, hey, you know what, we could be under a mill and we could just do phase 3. You know, I mean, there's various permutations that you could do, but I see that as a possibility to get community feedback on what is the appetite from the community after our operational funding is solidified.
I don't, no,
Yeah, not at
I
all.
agree with that.
I think we have to wait to see what happens with the state, because I think to Jeff's point, it's the same thing. Like what we were originally talking about was, it was to ensure the same thing, which is if we would need operational money, let's say that nothing changes and that we're not capped, then we were looking at the ability to do an operational and a bond as one issue. If that would not be successful, I think we would take the bond off, because again, I think operational would take the priority for sure. But it can be packaged together as one item for voters that you could then change from like May to November, and then it wouldn't offset our time frame of getting the money in January as a backup that we at least kind of talked about, because the operational is for sure the most important
Talk
part.
about every which way that we could do this, right? Because to your point, Mark, our number one priority is educate kids. Number one priority that will never change. It will always be that way. But I will tell you, there is a groundswell of people who want to see phases 3, 4, and 5. And it is a huge selling point to them. But we also designed this and planned this in a way where we could just go and say, we're going to do phase 3. And it's going to be a bond for, you know, $500,000 or whatever it was. And we do it and it's successful and it's great. But then we talk about now we're getting into voter fatigue as well, because we're fortunate to be in a situation where we don't have renewal levies, emergency levies, where we have to renew all the time. And I've been in districts where we've had to renew all the time, and then you try to add something new, and it's just it seems like you're on the ballot all the time, which takes a lot of energy. So yeah, we could attack it from a couple different ways, and I think it's important that we get feedback to help figure out which way it's going to be. So yeah, let's give us flexibility.
I mean, I get the idea about bundling it together, although there's a certain element of risk there. That you're putting bigger tax obligation on people and they'll vote the whole thing down because it's like that bill's too high and you don't want to go there. And so, you know, this is a good topic to have further conversation on. I would like to understand historically in Northeast Ohio how many bundled bond and levy issues passed and what those look like, because, you know, that's just the reality, is just a bigger ask. And unless you're doing a bond issue because your buildings are falling down, you've got buckets in the hallway and, you know, you got major problems, right? We're not in that situation.
Like you speak from experience, that still doesn't motivate some people to vote.
I know.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a little bit different if you bundle those two together, because you really have safety, and safety issues.
You're right.
And it may be far away, but we are not, I mean, our facilities, some of our athletic facilities we will call them serviceable, but they are aged and they need help, you know, so, and I get what you're saying. I mean, we have to be, operationally sound at all times, but I wouldn't say that, you know, it's that, that some of our facilities are, you know, just keep going, because it will end up continuing to cost us money, because some of them are not in good shape. I mean, or could be better. I would say that what I appreciate about this, because we're not phase 2 is happening. Okay. I mean, that we know. I appreciate the fact that you've endeavored, I think all of you in this room, that you've endeavored and all the work that you put in to this, because we do have a plan, right? That whether we do it or not, we have a plan with the directions, if and when, if we so choose. I think that it solves some problems, right, that we've had. I'm not talking about athletics, but I mean the point with needing entrance points, the traffic, safety, busing, all of that. It is going to alleviate some problems that we all remember the elementary school opening that, 3 years ago now, right? And the issues with transportation and busing going from a 3-tier system to a 2-tier. So I think that this is good, right? That we have that plan.
Oh, no doubt. And I commend the staff and everyone who helped put this together, and the architect. I mean, it's great, but it's kind of like seeing design plans for a new house. You want it
Oh,
all.
yeah, you want it all.
Like, oh my gosh, so get excited about it. It's like, this is great. And it is, and it's all great. And so at the end of the day, the community is going to be the one that decides. We have to facilitate what makes sense in terms of timing and going back to the community. And that's why, more conversations need to be had. I mean, we bring back the steering committee, that group certainly should see firsthand kind of, how this has evolved. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of excitement and people will be motivated to want to move the ball forward. And that's all great, but we just have to be methodical in how we do this, because you don't want to think you can just endlessly go back to the voters, right? You want to, as much as possible, want to frame it in a way that you think the community's going to support it, and not kind of cavalier, like, well, we'll put it all out there, and then if it fails, then we'll just take this piece off, because then you've seen that in other communities. You start getting bad will and and mistrust, that oh, now you really need this, blah blah blah. So we just have to be careful and remember, 70% of the community doesn't have students in our district.
So to your point about going back to the steering committee, that would be like a first step, right? And kind of having it and talking about it to stakeholders. What about, would we do anything like you've done in the past with doing a community meeting?
Absolutely. I mean, we have another one coming up. Is it this month? It might be.
Yeah, it's at the end of April.
Yeah, end of April at the middle school.
Yeah.
Where we had a certain topic of the elementary building that was appropriate to the time that we dealt with. This one, I could infuse this conversation into that. But to Mark's point, the 70% of our community that doesn't have kids in our community is the 70% of the community we have a tough time reaching.
Right.
And I've already decided, and Craig will probably join me as well. I'm sure he's kind of in favor of it. But our coffee chats that we've had this year have been wildly successful. And at April, I think, is our last one for this school year. But starting in August, we're going to do them every month through the school year. It's just going to be a continuous thing for us.
That's been nice.
I enjoy doing it. It allows me to connect with people in the community that I don't get the opportunity to meet. And it's the Thursday morning after the board meetings is basically what it's going to turn into. So that'll be an opportunity for people to come, but we've got to continue to find ways. Our newsletter goes out quarterly. We'll start infusing this information in there. And to speak to Mark's point about, our reputation in the district is very important. We do not want to be the district that threatens. We don't want to be the district that throws it out there and hopes for the best and then comes back and makes changes. We want our community to see the work that we've put in, the time we've put in, and here are our options. And it's the community's decision in the end. So we want to go, and when we go, they know that we've done our homework, that we looked at multiple options, and we believe at this point in time this is the best option given the environment that we're in. And who knows where things will be 3, 4, 5 months from now. And in today's day and age, we don't, right now, especially the status of everything, we don't want to be on the ballot more than we absolutely have to be, because it's a challenge.
Yeah, and I think that the newsletter has been beneficial for sure in getting some of the message out. I just listened to Jim Crooks, who said what was his dad that saw it. He said this is the most financial information that he's ever received. He's been very happy with but that was indicative of the survey.
Right.
So when we did the scientific survey, it was that we want people to know more about our finances. So it's been very helpful, in addition to the coffee chats, to include and have a larger footprint in there. We've added to it. We're not really necessarily taking away other things from it, but it is a larger focal point, which the community members that are not with kids in schools are appreciating to get more information from us, at least on the financial.
It's every mailbox in our school district. So it's an investment too, though. That's not cheap to do that newsletter, but the feedback we get is it's valuable. So again, we're stewards of our community's money, and if they find that to be valuable, we'll continue doing it as long as we can.
I have just two, like, I have the same reluctance you do, especially like with the state budget so much in flux about timing of this. But it does seem like it makes sense timing wise to at least resurrect that steering committee and get some additional input. And then I don't mean to beat a dead horse, and this is, I know, a literal drop in the bucket, but it might be time to revisit that little piece of property we own in Broadview Heights because of how much property values have gone up lately. Just, you know,
I don't know much about it. Well, again, that, you're talking a couple $100,000. I mean, that's not gonna move the needle. We're talking 35 million in what we're talking about proposing. So that doesn't move the needle at all, but.
It might be something though to consider if we were to think about phasing this out at some point, because we wouldn't possibly need that.
I don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm gonna go back to that. It's land, man. Once you.
You are
give up
right.
land, you never get it back. We don't know. I mean, we had this conversation in the past and forth, but I'll just reiterate my position on it
Right.
is that land, you can look at it and it is true that today the district does not need that land. But boy, how do you know 20 years from now, the district won't need that land for something that doesn't even exist today? So, and we're gonna turn it in for what, a couple $100,000, which does nothing. It won't make an impact at all.
well, I guess we don't, you're saying a couple $100,000 and it could be more than that now just because of the way property values have gone. Does it make sense to just get it reappraised? That's all.
I mean, we can pull out the appraisal was only done a couple of years that we got on that property,
Was
so
it?
it's not that old. I want
Yeah,
to say
we
it
did
was
it,
like.
we did it like in
Like
22, I think.
300,000 or something.
Sounds like 3 years
It
ago.
wasn't the
I feel like
big,
it
it
was
wasn't
3 or
the big,
400.
it wasn't the big number, so, I mean, geez, let's just say it was 400,000, right? I mean, if it went up 20%, it's $480,000. I mean, I don't, so.
I don't know. I think it was 300,000 or 400,000 offhand. I can
I
find
think
it.
like 370 something.
Yeah. I think it was 22. We did that.
What would it, I mean, I have no history with this. I just want to know, given its location, what would you see it being used for?
What you're asking me today, we don't have a need for it. But what I'm saying is
We're
that
looking down the path.
down the road,
Yeah.
right, there may be, we need a drone field because drones have taken over and we need a spot to do like a drone hangar and drone, who knows? I don't know. That's what I'm saying. You don't know what you don't know, but it's a piece of property that the district owns. It doesn't cost us anything. It's basically cost neutral. And it's something that the district down the road may find that we have a need for. And you just know, I mean, I'm back on the old Wallings Road School that the district got rid of, right? And it was like, now I get it that was a building, that was a school, right? But that was such, that did not turn into a good look when then we needed to bring online another school. And so, but it's the same concept, which is it's property. So you don't know what you don't know. You can do enrollment studies and all this other stuff. So clearly that property is not big enough for a school, but you don't know down the road what kind of a need the district might have. And it's like, all of a sudden it's like, well, you can't put a school there, but you sure could put a fill in the blank, which doesn't exist today, but 15, 20 years from now, you might need a fill in the blank. And so why get rid of it? And then you go back and say, oh, well, you had this piece of property, but we got $400,000 for it, 20 years ago. And now we don't have the property. Anyway, I mean, that's kind of, that's why I say, man, it's property. Property is an asset. It doesn't cost you anything. And, it's one thing if the thing was worth $4 million, but, you're looking at these numbers, something that's under $500,000, it's just not gonna move the needle from my standpoint.
Well, Lisa, what are your thoughts?
Oh, I mean, I think this all sounds great. I guess my thought is like, the longer this goes out, the more I have concerns that people are gonna start noodling with it. I know we're committing ourselves to this plan, but you know, if anything, people change, attitudes change, and then if we're pushing, especially like the renovation of the middle schools as phase 7, and if we're saying like, you know, if we went to bond that wouldn't even include a renovation of the middle school, I think, you know, that's something people are gonna want. So I don't know. I mean, that's something that affects all the middle school students. It would affect almost every student in this district if you have a child pass through the middle school. So I think like leaving that off a bond could be a question. I guess the other question I have is, I mean, you could do the middle school, you could do it as phase 4, right? I mean, you could move it up, or would you not do that?
Well, we just don't have any numbers for it right now.
You could,
Because
yeah,
it's
you
like,
just
is
don't
it a
know.
renovation or is it a remodel or is it? So we didn't go down that road. We just didn't feel as though the building's in that condition where.
And maybe
that
we need
was
to
a
get more,
priority.
same thing, get more feedback, I think, from steering on that one, that specific building of what did they envision for that building? Cause it really is hard because I think you really could be on the spectrum of truly, I mean, you could probably renovate some of that building, a large part of that building for $2 million, but if you're talking about a full, it could be really expensive.
I guess.
So I don't know I don't know what people feel we need in there, but because of the bones are the way it is, so I don't know.
Right, and that building right now, it was built in 1960, right? The main building, so I mean, it's 65 years old, is that right? Am I mathing right? So, you know, if we keep, the further we keep putting it off, if it's 10 years before we get to it, I don't know, then it's 75 years old. So I guess, and at that point, are people gonna say, well, why are we renovating this 65, 75-year-old building? Like, I don't know. So I guess I just worry, you know, at that point that not that I feel like the faster we could get this done would be better, because we're kind of, and then if we can get everything done, especially maybe the middle school. I know we haven't had conversations about it, just more to think about, but that would be something like if we were gonna go to the community and say, it's everything. And it would be done a lot quicker, it'd be done, you know, it would impact all of our students, it would impact athletics and our school facilities stuff. So, you know, that it's like right now we're sort of leaving the middle school renovation off, and I understand why, but that could be something like if we add that back in, you know, or move it up in the timeline. I don't know.
Well, that would
They've
be
done the-
something the steering committee.
Yeah,
And
right.
they've done the work to evaluate systems in the building, right? VG, so we have that information.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the whole idea about postponing the middle school renovations because it doesn't need it right now. I mean, we've put millions of dollars into that building. I mean, their auditorium's just been renovated, there's new security vestibule.
Yeah.
New roofs, we did new HVAC, I mean, air conditioning in the whole building. So, I mean, it's, you know, the idea to renovate it now, I don't know. I guess the thinking I thought was the building is in solid condition right now. There, you know, and that some of the ongoing renovation happens right with the abatement of asbestos, you know, tiles and stuff that's being done piecemeal, right? And things can continue to be done piecemeal to keep the building secure, safe, dry, and a good environment. You know, but like a whole full refresh of it, it seems like, at least from my understanding was it doesn't need it right now. So to throw that into the mix to say, let's get money to renovate the whole thing now, you also have to present to the community, why does it need to be renovated right now? And if you walk people through the buildings, they may not get the sense that this is a priority to renovate.
And some of the rooms that have been renovated, no, I think it's the Saints room one with the new carpet, the drop ceiling and everything else. I mean, it's like being in a new building in that one room. That's kind of the process is they have abated rooms is making sure that, okay, we check that room off the list. And luckily the auditorium's been done. I mean, gym space is an issue at the middle school, but it doesn't hinder what we do. It's just something we have to work around. It's just overcrowded. You know, we have one gym. Again, it is, but you service 3 grade levels with one gym. Where the high school, you have 2, but you only really, it's freshman and sophomore in high school.
Oh, and the gym isn't air conditioning. So that's the only spot that's not air conditioning.
It's the only spot that wasn't, you know.
There, as you start peeling the onion, you start to look at a little more things, the exterior windows. Yeah, the roof's good. The next step are the windows. You want to make sure you're dry. And then the windows are not cheap. When you look at all the windows around the entire facility, renovation is something we can't piecemeal together. We can get by and we properly maintain our facility. It's just all right, is there an appetite to take it to the next step to make it last for a long time instead of a reactive, oh, this window's leaking, we need to fix it. Or this one's starting to rot out, let's fix it.
And I don't see grant opportunities, becoming more available from the larger picture.
And not a grant opportunity they're there for safety, for the vestibules, for your cameras, for that. They aren't in it for a clean environment for the students. You know, when you walk into one of these classrooms we've done the carpet in, it is a welcoming environment to learn. And that's really the goal of that, is that the students are going to get a higher education or a perceived better education in a building that has fresh carpet, or a classroom that has fresh carpet, new LED lights and stuff like that. So that's the purpose of it.
Well, and maybe that, that could be something, Lisa, to your point, like if we went down, because I talked about chunking out into, just do phase 3, 4, 5 could be separate. You could, if feedback we're getting from the community is that, we don't think there'll be support for the athletic piece of it. But if they have support for the middle school piece of it, maybe phase 3, maybe that includes windows or what are the other high priority things, so that it's a middle school I don't go call it renovation.
Refresh. Yeah, phase 3 could fit that refresh.
Phase 3 has a little bit of it too already with the art rooms.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think going to the steering committee and back to them for feedback is a good thought, because they'll.
And I guess I would ask you as board members, continue to keep your ears to the ground. If there are quasi steering group committees that I would get in front of, I'd be happy to. I think of my gentlemen at Panera when I'm there every day and seeing them. And, obviously they're invested in the community and don't have kids in the district anymore. Love their feedback on it. And, but anytime I can get in front of anybody to share this, to get that feedback, I'm more than happy to do it. That's not a problem for me. I enjoy it, number one. Number two, it's just a good way to connect with our community.
Do you really go to Panera every day?
No, I don't go every day. No, not every day. No, I'm not part of the SIP club anymore. I used to be, when it was $7.99 a month and I could get my free, coffee. There's,
Brian's still a member though.
but when our coffee chat's there, I see the same gentleman sitting there every morning. I'm in there.
Mhm.
So next steps then is to go back, reassemble the steering committee.
Yeah, and I think it's time to just start having some of these conversations with people informally. We have a little bit of time here while we're waiting for the state to sort things out. So between now and August, I would say, let's make this a topic of conversation in different groups that you're associated with. And it's bound to lead to more questions that you will be prepared on a surface level to answer. But when somebody really wants to dig in, or they seem to have a really a special interest about it, send them our way. And if that leads to another steering committee, then that's fine. And we'll bring the people in and we'll make it a topic for our coffee chats, our communicators thing here in April. And if it starts to drum up some excitement or questions, we'll go on the road with it, PSO meetings or whatever. But always be thinking of those other groups and how we can get in front of some of them.
Well, and I think you mentioned too, maybe this is a town hall meeting.
Yeah,
too,
totally. Yep.
We tee it up and put it out to the community, so.
And maybe we can start targeting on August for that. Back to school, people are usually tuned in with what's going on in the school district in August. And that still gives us some time before, if we wanted to go as early as spring of 26, that gives some feedback to digest after we know what the state budget is going to be and what the outlook for future asks are going to be. So we'll start teeing that up and tentatively put some things for a town hall like that.
Okay.
So thank you guys. Thank you.
Anybody else have any other thoughts, comments, questions?
Okay. Back up on item number 3.
Okay, item number 3, regular board meeting. Next regular meeting of the Board of Education is scheduled for Wednesday, April 16th. That's in 2 days. This meeting will be held at the BBH High School Auditorium because we will be recognizing many of our students and their many accomplishments. So please feel free to join us at the high school auditorium. Item 4A, motion to adjourn meeting. May I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second,
Roll call.
Mrs. Gaelic,
Yes.
Mrs. Kramer,
Yes.
Ms. Mikowski.
Yes.
Ms. O'Meara,
Yes.
Mr. Dosen.
Yes, meeting's adjourned. We'll be back here in 2 days. Have a good evening, everyone.